Before this episode begins, I'd like to inform you all that voting is still open for the year-end awards. If you have not already, be sure to get in your votes before the end of the month. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to a special preview edition of the Center of the Universe, where we will be previewing some of the key matches at the Survivor Series event, how we got here, and what we can look forward to at this show. To begin with, we'll be looking at the match that will open the pay-per-view portion of the Survivor Series event, that being a traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team match featuring SmackDown's Absolution against Raw's Trifecta. Tessa Blanchard's Trifecta have been the most dominant force on Raw, and perhaps in the entire women's division since their arrival to the Red Brand after WrestleMania. And having dismantled almost everyone in said division, Blanchard set her sights elsewhere. The clues were dropped, but until Rhea Ripley and Jazzy Gabert made their arrival on SmackDown, we couldn't be sure. The challenge had been laid out by Trifecta, and Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville had been laid out in turn. Paige made sure to give her response on the very next edition of Raw, taking out Jazzy Gabert and announcing she would team with Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville to reunite Absolution against the force of Trifecta. With both sides having invaded either show and trading victories on the most recent week of action in Universe, what will happen when the two women's champions of their respective brand meet to kick off a great evening of action? Will Trifecta continue to assert their dominance on women's wrestling? Or will Paige and her Absolution be enough to derail Trifecta's control of that very division? Next up on that evening, we have an important contest that has all the hallmarks of being a sleeper match to remember on what is a WrestleMania caliber card. Two of the most skilled grapplers, along with talented wrestlers this company has ever seen, will finally square off one-on-one in another battle between SmackDown and Raw, as the leader of the Yes Movement, Bryan, will square up against the longest reigning WWE champion in the history of this universe, Bobby Fish. While we were never given a legitimate reason for Fish's attack on Bryan during an episode of Raw, Bryan didn't need one. From that point on, his sights were set on Fish, and if he had to go through the Dangerous Alliance to get his hands on them, then he would, and he did. Bryan showed up on SmackDown twice, looking to get his hands on Bobby Fish, and both times, Fish was able to scarper away. He has been running since the evening he put his hands on Bryan, but now, there is nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, and no one to save him. At Survivor Series, it will be Bobby Fish pitted in that ring against Bryan, in what will surely be a match to remember between two of the all-time greats and two future Hall of Famers, but which will leave victorious? What would Survivor Series be without a traditional 4v4 elimination match? And that's exactly what we'll get on this fantastic night of action, as Team Raw and Team ECW will collide for the right to be the superior brand. Both sides have a star-studded lineup looking to prove why their brand is the superior one, with Team Captain and World Heavyweight Champion Roman Reigns, Andrade Cien Almas, AJ Styles, and United States Champion Pete Dunne representing Raw, pitted against Team Captain Johnny Gargano, the Revival Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, and, as we can reveal following a highly controversial ending to the final ECW before Survivor Series, Adam Cole will be the fourth and final member of ECW's team, in a topic that will be discussed later on. A rivalry for brand supremacy began almost immediately, with Reigns storming into ECW to attack Gargano on the very first ECW of the new series, laying him out with a spear in his own yard. Reigns would follow up quickly, putting out the challenge to Gargano for Team Raw vs Team ECW at Survivor Series, with Reigns and Gargano as their respective captains. Gargano wouldn't wait long, replying that very night to Reigns' request. The match was now on. Now was time to get the teams ready. Gargano would make the first move, acquiring the Revival on the next episode of ECW to join his team, before Raw even had the chance to get another person on their side. Next week on Raw, in a heated qualifying match between Samoa Joe and Andrade that would see El Idolo leave victorious, He was welcomed to the war that it had become between the two brands as the Revival hit the ring, laying out Andrade with the Shatter Machine and standing tall to close that episode of Raw. While Gargano would take credit for the attack, he couldn't be prepared for the actions of Reigns on the next episode of ECW. Reigns would arrive, taking out Scott Dawson with a spear into a breaker box. While Dawson will compete at Survivor Series, he is not at 100% fitness, with some doctors recommending that he shouldn't fight altogether. That same night, Reigns would storm Gargano in the parking lot, laying him out with the same spear before running into the night. In one move, Roman Reigns had taken out 2/3 of the then Team ECW. But Raw still had to fill their slots, and did so with AJ Styles and Pete Dunne, the latter of whom winning through an outside action from an invading Walter, joining Team Raw. However, that night was not that simple, and would show cracks that were beginning to emerge on Team Raw. First, Dash Wilder arrived to Raw, armed with a chair in hand, taking his anger out on Andrade, assaulting him with the chair before going on the hunt for Roman Reigns. While Reigns would jump in from behind, he would spring the trap from ECW as Gargano lay in wait, and the fight broke out once more between the two captains. However, though AJ Styles was in close proximity to the fight, he chose not to get involved, standing back and letting the two men go at it, which didn't sit well within the world champion. This was not the only time that Styles failed to assist the captain on the way to Survivor Series, as he failed to assist him in the invasion of ECW later that week, leaving Reigns susceptible to an attack once more, this time from Dash Wilder, finally getting his revenge for the actions on Dawson the week before. To close the evening of Raw action, while Dunne would be victorious, Gargano quickly came through the crowd, laying at the champion with a Goat Slayer to close the show. While Raw failed to invade ECW successfully on the final show before Survivor Series, it was another force that no one was prepared for that marred the show in controversy, as ECW champion Tetsuya Naito and fellow members of LIJ would storm the ring, taking out Adam Cole and Braun Strowman almost simultaneously. However, as Strowman was attacked after the bell had been rung for the disqualification, this meant the decision for the match was an Adam Cole victory, granting him the fourth and final spot on Team ECW. Though Cole is on the team, like Dawson, he too is not at 100% fitness. Will this be a problem for ECW to claim victory? Whatever the case, this has been marred in brand warfare and dirty guerrilla tactics from the start all the way to the finish. Now, there can be no jumping the opponent, as the two sides will be contained within one ring. With world champions past, present, and future in that ring, it's certainly the most stacked Survivor Series elimination match we've seen, and from what we've seen so far, it looks to be the best. But only one side can win for their roster. Who will it be? But once all the dust has settled on everything else that comes our way at Survivor Series, it will be time for the rematch of a lifetime. The most anticipated rematch in universe history, as Kazuchika Okada and Seth Rollins will face each other once more at Survivor Series, in the first ever 60-minute Iron Man match in the history of this universe. For over a year, both men have desired to be the very best, and while it's safe to say that no one is better than these men in this company, we've never had our answer. Last year, we were promised the match of a lifetime between these two men, as then ECW champion Seth Rollins challenged Okada to the match for Survivor Series. It was certainly an incredible match, with both men giving it their all, kicking out of each other's respective finishing maneuvers as they attempted to prove they were the superior competitor. However, that match has been remembered for the actions of someone else rather than what we saw from the two in the ring. Corin would invade the match, laying waste to both men and ruining what had the potential to be the greatest match in the history of this company. For a year, we'd hear whispers of a rematch, with fans of both men wanting to see the match between both men, but nothing would come our way in the grand scheme of things, as they were too busy making their own legacy in this company, on their respective brands, and in wrestling folklore as two of the greatest to ever compete in the sport we all love. Okada would once again become WWE Champion, the title he still holds heading into Survivor Series, while Seth Rollins was breaking every record in sight as ECW Champion. If both men were to take each other on again, now would be the time. Both men were champions, both men were on top of the world, and there was no one else who could rival them on that mountain. That was until SummerSlam. Gargano escape! Is this the one? Brooklyn on their feet! They are at fever pitch! It's locked in! Is there any fight out for Rollins? Oh my God! The Richter scale was shattered when Johnny Gargano submitted Rollins to win the ECW Championship, ending his reign at 729 days, almost double the next longest reign in universe history. Following this, Rollins took an extended leave of absence, citing a swath of injuries sustained during his legendary reign as the reason. While Rollins was gone, only Okada stood at the top of that mountain now, and the hopes of a rematch at Survivor Series seemed to be dashed. Maybe we were to never get the rematch between the all-time greats. That was until Okada took actions into his own hands. Does he mean what I think he... Oh my God! Okada has challenged Rollins for Survivor Series! The challenge was put out. The hopes were back in force. Okada had been challenged the year before, but now he was the one doing the challenging. We were ready. But silence followed our way. 1 week passed, then another. Nothing. Okada demanded an answer, and after being invited to ECW, he got one. On behalf of Seth Rollins, Kazuchika Okada, he accepts your challenge for Survivor Series. Kazuchika Okada, Seth Rollins challenges you to a 60-minute Iron Man match. Now, the fight was on. And at Survivor Series, the match we've waited over a year for, will finally happen once more. It will be the Rainmaker versus the greatest of all time too. The excitement has filled the air, the anticipation is at its peak, and we are all ready for 60 minutes of the two greatest wrestlers in the world today, finally getting to decide who the greatest truly is. While it may be SmackDown versus ECW, the brands are second to the men in the ring, the two men who stand at the top of the mountain of wrestling. But once 60 minutes has passed, only one will stand at its peak. Seth Rollins returns at Survivor Series with a chip on his shoulder and a desire like no other to defeat Okada, to cement his already well-planted legacy as one of the greatest to ever do it. Both men have immense respect for the other, but both men need to beat the other. Only one can do it. It's the match we've all been waiting for. It's the most anticipated rematch of all time. It's the main event to Survivor Series. It's 60 minutes. It's Rainmaker versus greatest of all time too. It's Kazuchika Okada versus Seth Rollins. Don't forget, if you would like early access to every video uploaded, that includes Raw, SmackDown, ECW, pay-per-views such as this one, then be sure to consider investing just $2 a month to the channel and help support yours truly out. You'll gain access to special emotes, a logo by your name, and as previously mentioned, all videos 24 hours early minimum. In the case of this upcoming Survivor Series, by the time you're watching this episode of the Center of the Universe, the people paying just $2 a month are watching that event. That'll do it for this special edition of the Center of the Universe. We will see you at Survivor Series.